you, Mr. Chairman. Uh, Director Haynes, I'd like to ask you a question I ask pretty much every foreign policy leader that we have before this committee. What is your analysis of what China's goals are? What does China want?
Thank you, Senator. Well, obviously, I'm not here as a foreign policy analyst, but regardless, I'm happy to give you a sense of how the analysts perceive it. I think, as a general matter, China sees itself as rising and sees the United States as declining and is not interested in going to war, but perceives that as a concern as these trajectories, from their perspective, pass each other in a sense. And in that context, China believes that the United States is trying to check China's rise, and in that context is countering, from their perspective, again, what they perceive to be our influence and our efforts in this area. I think in their perception, they are increasingly perceiving it as a zero-sum game, and that promotes, in a sense, their efforts to really push us out in a way, and to be a threat across a range of factors and see us as a threat to them in that context.
Let me change the subject. To what extent, and you mentioned this in your opening testimony and in your written statement, expand a bit on climate change as a national security concern. The one I'm particularly concerned about is incipient migration from areas of the world that become essentially uninhabitable because of drought, famine, extreme heat. Do you see this as a threat multiplier, as a serious national security concern, as well as, of course, an environmental concern?
I do, absolutely. I mean, I think part of the challenge for us is recognizing that climate change has just enormous impact in every aspect of our lives and with respect to almost every threat that we're facing, is figuring out how to actually embed and integrate climate science and analysis, essentially, across the board of our intelligence community work so that we can ensure that we're actually lifting up the places where it's in fact having that kind of impact. So to your point, without question, the impact the climate is having on migration is something that we've written about within the intelligence community, the trend lines that produces, the concerns that creates. Another example is in the context of increased drought and sort of the shifting boundaries of dry areas. What you see is that affects agriculture, that in turn creates tension that can drive conflict, for example. That's another aspect of it. You see increasing floods. That's obviously a challenge for countries around the world, particularly ones that don't have the resilience to react to them in a way that allows them to continue, and can actually promote fractures of society as a consequence over time. So there's so many different aspects and dimensions to this challenge. And what we've been trying to do is ensure that we can actually bring in that expertise and integrate it effectively and make it available across the community so that we can integrate that work into our daily work, in effect, while also looking at the long-term trends that it produces.
And of course, historically, access to arable land has been the cause of wars throughout our history. We've pivoted largely from a focus on terrorism to peer and near-peer state competition, and I understand that, and I think that's appropriate. I'm still concerned, however, about the terrorist threat, and the particular one that keeps me up at night is terrorist access to a nuclear device, either through development or more likely through purchase. Deterrence has protected us from a nuclear conflict for 70 years. Deterrence wouldn't work with a terrorist organization. Talk to me about the role of intelligence in protecting us from the nightmare of a nuclear weapon in the hold of a tramp steamer bound into the port of New York or Miami.
Yeah, absolutely, Senator. And I know you know a fair amount about how we work on these issues, particularly given your role on the Intelligence Committee. I would say that part of the effort in and as you say, the rebalance, in effect, recognizing the rise of state-to-state competition is not taking your eye off the ball of non-state actor and transnational threats, including terrorism. And that is absolutely something that we're committed to. And in the context of, in particular, terrorist groups, we monitor and try to track them to the best degree that we can. It's a diffuse issue, as you know, spanning many regions of the globe. We are, in particular, looking for the kinds of weapons that they can use that give them extraordinary capacity to have catastrophic effects. And we look to ensure that we understand those networks as best we can, and then provide whatever warning we're capable of providing under the circumstances. I think beyond that, we can obviously talk further in closed session.
Thank you. I think the attackers on September 11th killed 3,000 people. They would have killed 3 million if they could have. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.